Students who ended up in relationship with their teacher. How did it start? How did it end up? Story 1. I slept with one of my professors in college. At the time I was 19 or 20 and she was in her mid-30s. I went to see her during her office hours. We talked for a few minutes, and when I went to leave, she gave me a long hug and told me, "You give really nice hugs," as she held onto my arms. I asked for her number and went on my way. We exchanged a few flirty text messages over the next few days before she invited me over to her apartment to help her hook up a new TV she had bought. We ended up sleeping together about 10 times before she moved away to take a new job at a different school. Story 2. It started innocently enough. She was my chorus teacher, fresh out of college and only 6 years older than me. My brother was actually dating her friend from high school. I used to cut class and say I had a music lesson, and we just hang out in the music room, talk about books, music, movies. Then she started complaining about her relationship a lot, needing hugs, which I was more than happy to help with it. Eventually turned to making out, and we finally started hooking up. When she gave me rides home after school, I honestly felt like I found $1 million, but couldn't tell anybody about it. It was weird. Then she got weird, asking for her hugs in front of the entire class. I knew everyone knew. I started riding home with my friends again. Then she started just showing up at my house. Had a very awkward convo with my dad, who knew exactly what was going on, but was so impressed he just kept saying, "Damn, she's pretty." Ghosting hadn't been invented back then, but I did the best I could. Eventually, she chilled out. A few months later, I stopped by her room during our normal hang cess time, and she apologized, told me she was just going through a lot with her shitty boyfriend and needed some attention from someone that actually liked her. We didn't talk much after that. I graduated soon after, but we're friends on Facebook, and she actually married a decent guy and has a nice family. I'm very relieved we never found out. It would have been devastating to both of us. Story 3. Had a crush on one of my grad school teachers for a year and a half. I was into everything about her. Looks, brain, everything. I ended up teaching the same subject many years later, and I still use the notes and materials from her classes with my own students. She was engaged to someone else, so I never even thought about anything ever happening. It was a nice fantasy. Then out of the blue, she calls my cell phone and tells me that she's thinking of getting into yoga and knows that I am into yoga. So would I get a drink with her and tell her more? I was not exactly experienced with hookups, and I actually took her at her word. I went expecting to talk about yoga and go home afterwards. We ended up getting totally wasted, making out in the middle of a bar, and then I walked her home, where I kept saying I'm sorry, and this definitely isn't happening, and I'll just get you to your door and go home. It did happen. But the joke was on her. She got a few seconds of the wash of her life and then got to listen to me in the bathroom for a while. The next day she found me in the hallway and told me that it was a huge mistake and asked me not to tell anyone. Nobody would believe me anyway, so I agreed. I can honestly say I wish the entire thing had never happened. She got married and moved on with her life. I ended up having to take her husband's class before I could graduate. Story 4. My religious studies college professor. She was hilarious and brilliant and always brought her interest up in class, and they usually aligned with mine. It started off with what felt like on-topic to class discussions, then into more friendly casual conversations about books and movies. Then it definitely transitioned into flirting, which was weird because I'm also female and had never had feelings for another girl. So I thought it could just be some weird fantasy to see in my head, and I was just making something out of nothing. Anyways, fast forward, semester ends. I'm out of her class. I submit my final at noon. By 1 p.m., G mails me my final grade and says, "I'm all done submitting your grades, so you're officially no longer my student. Congrats on passing the class and good luck." So I sent back an email with a song attached, and then the emailing went on from there before we officially hung out, which led to a 3-year relationship. Moved in together for about a year, but it ultimately didn't work out cause we wanted different things long term, but we ended on good terms, and I'm grateful for the relationship now 5 years out, as it helped me realize what I want in a partner. I now have an amazing boyfriend, and I heard she recently got married to a woman she started dating after me. You know, it's nice to read one of these that has a good ending. Thank you for sharing. Story 5. I guess I technically had a relationship with a teacher. She was the lab tech for my invertebrate zoology lab and refused to do anything with me until after the class. After classes, We partied and hooked up quite a lot. After a year of us still being together, others started dating undergrads. 7 years later, we're married and have a kid together. Story 6. I fell in love with the workshop supervisor at my university that guides the workshop that I need for my education. She's about a year older than I am. I am doing some small arts and crafts and leather working. She was interested in getting something, and she bought something custom. I can't remember how it started out, but for some reason or another, we had some drinks which ended in a night spent together and a relationship. We discovered an attraction to each other. She went to the faculty director with the situation and explained it. Since she cannot give marks on my work and is only a guide in the eyes of the university, they approved the relationship. That was about 3 years ago. We are still together as I am finishing my education. The relationship moved on from the flirt, which it all started with, to something deep. We have lived together for 2 years now, and she helps me with running the 2 companies that I set up aside from my studies. When I finished my education next year, I will even propose to her. I like the part where she went clean to the faculty director, even though she knew she could have gotten into some serious trouble. Glad it worked out, man. All the best. Story 7. There was a super hot student teacher that was at our school, so he was only like 22/23 maybe. I was 17 and it was at our graduation dinner. We had snuck a bottle of passion poppin', so we were pretty tipsy. I told him I always thought he was hot, and before I knew it, his hands were down my pants. We still had about 3 weeks to go before we left school, so spent the next week effing around the school and nearly getting caught a bunch of times. It was pretty hot, to be honest, and I still think about him from time to time. As a person who supervises student teachers, this story gives me anxiety. I don't supervise student teachers, and it's making me anxious. Story 8. So I actually didn't know she was my teacher. She was maybe about 23 to 24 and I just turned 17. I was in California during summer vacation. Went to Disneyland, California Adventure, all the fun stuff. Met her while in line for the Winnie the Pooh ride. We had fun, hit it off, and eventually went to our hotel room. Spent the weekend meeting up and hanging out, and then we parted ways. First day of the new semester comes around and I see her in the classroom and I'm excited. I didn't know she went to this school, and so I went in and sat down, and she went up to the front of the room and introduced herself to everyone. Then we did the whole thing, getting to know each other and what we did over summer. Got to me, her face turned purple like she couldn't breathe. Story 9. When I was 17, I had a fake ID and went out to the bar with a couple older friends after a hockey game who met a group of girls, and we hung out for most of the night. Ended up going home with one of the girls. We hooked up that night with exchanged numbers and I left in the morning. So Monday comes around. I go to school and walk into my first period class, and the same girl I hooked up with is the supply teacher. Her face was about as red as an apple, and I was strutting my seat like Vince McMahon. Story 10. Mine may not count, but I was 21 and in college and using Occupied, and I matched with this cute girl who's a grad student who hit it off, and our fields of study are similar but not the same, so there's no chance there will be a conflict of interest or anything. So we go out on a date to a dive bar, get a bit drunk, hit it off, go back to her place to drink more and screw. A few days later the semester starts, and among my classes, I'm taking a statistics for people who can't do math class and who should be my teacher but her. For like ethics reasons, I couldn't keep screwing her while she was my teacher, but once the semester was over, we hooked up a few more times. Story 11. Not sure if it counts, but I dated my high school teacher 6 months after I graduated. He is my junior year history teacher. Had a massive crush on him in class, and he probably knew, but he never did anything inappropriate. Strictly a teacher-student relationship. He was 29, got in trouble as a teacher for going against the grain, had tattoos and a dad bod. I was super into it. Always thought he was really intelligent too, but looking back I realized he had just had more time to form his own opinions about the world. During my first semester in college, took a chance and hit him up. We kind of hit it off and dated for 6 months. 3 months and he told me that this was the longest relationship he'd had since he was in high school. I lived with him briefly during summer break in college. Story 12. Boned a teacher's intern that was a student at local community college my senior year. She was previously a student at the school and lived relatively close to my neighborhood. I had a study hall after lunch, which essentially meant I had a 2-hour lunch. She was only 3 years older, and we had flirted a lot when she was still in school at the HS my sophomore year. Unfortunately, not everyone in this thread was as Casual. My heart goes out to anyone that was actually abused.